How's it going? This is Hoiman, and today we're taking a look at the Totaku Knuckles figure. So for the most part, I think they did a really good job at the sculpt of this figure. Definitely captures the likeness of the character really well. And then all the detail you'd expect is pretty much present. And overall, it's just a nice looking sculpt of the character. But I do have quite a lot of problems with it, which I'll get to in a bit. So taking a closer look at Knuckles' face, I feel that they have captured the likeness of his character really well. Looks pretty much like the character from pretty much all angles. And then the eyes are nicely painted for the most part, but there are some areas where the white kind of bleeds into the red. And that's the same for the peach on his face as well. But the pupils themselves, they're very nice and clean for the most part. Moving to his face, you can see his smile here, but it is a bit scuffy near the base, so it's a bit unfortunate. And then the nose is a nice glossy finish, but again, it does kind of bleed into the peach a bit. And then you move into the red, which is pretty much molded in red plastic. So it looks nice for the most part, but there is a bit of a scuff in the sculpt here. So it's quite noticeable as well, so it's quite unfortunate. And then his spines are nicely sculpted all around his head. But again, there's actually seam lines that run across each spine. So it does kind of detract from the figure quite a bit. And then you can even see that some parts aren't fully molded here. So it's quite noticeable as well because it's on a bright color. Move down to his body. The body itself is nicely sculpted. And then you move on to the tail. It's nicely sculpted, but there is a seam line that shows where they connected the tail to the body. So it's quite noticeable, and again the tail itself has a seam line that runs across the length as well. And then moving to his gloves, they are nicely sculpted and they are actually painted white, so they look quite nice, but there isn't really any shading going on, so it doesn't really define too much of the sculpt and detailing. But again, they do have seam lines that run across the entire hand. And because it's on a white color, they're quite noticeable as well. And for whatever reason, there's a lot of odd sculpting scuffs on various areas, so it does detract from the figure a bit. Move down to the shoes. They are nicely sculpted and detailed, but the paintwork on them are very scuffy. You can see how the green bleeds into the yellow. And then the parts where the yellow meets the red is a bit unclean as well. And then for whatever reason, there's a lot of paint scuffs of random colors around the shoes as well. And because they're really bright as well, they're really noticeable. And that's the same on this other shoe as well. But then you have the base itself. It's a nice glossy finish. And it really captures the effect of the 16-bit games. So that's really nice. And then you have the actual Master Emerald, which is a nice translucent piece, and it does look really effective as well. It's really nicely sculpted. And then the base, there's the iconic checkered pattern that runs across the entire frame of the base. And then at the bottom you have legal stuff. So overall, this figure is a nice looking figure of Knuckles. It definitely captures the likeness of the character really well. But like I said, with all the seam lines and all the weird scuffs on all the paintwork, it does detract from this figure quite a bit. And because he's mainly in bright colors, all the seam lines and paint scuffs are pretty noticeable as well. So it does detract from the figure. And another gripe I have is that because his legs are really thin, it does make the figure quite delicate. Like it almost feels like he wants to snap. So you have to be careful of them, and they are quite a solid plastic as well. So it feels like they can easily break. So yeah, you just have to be careful when handling this figure. But despite all my gripes, if you are a fan of this character or the games, then I can still recommend this figure. And the figure isn't really that expensive, so if you're definitely a fan of the character, then I can recommend this figure. But that's my review. Thank you for watching and enjoy some pictures.